And here we are, Tuesday training. Woohoo! Okay. Welcoming everybody in. Welcoming everybody in for Tuesday training. It's our last Tuesday training of the year, and it's also our last Tuesday training on this particular case study. At least that's my intention for today. We get to wrap up this case study. We have been getting some value from this case study week after week after week. Hey, Anna, it's nice to see you live. Hello, hello. Are you in LA now or are you back? You're in LA now in the warmth. Okay, good for you. Awesome. No, it's not warm. Sorry to hear that. That's a bummer. It's not warm here either. We had our, oh, you're in sweaters. Yeah, me too. We had our first like official snowstorm front, the windy and the icy and the snowy. And I'm holding my own. I told a friend of mine today, I'm never leaving the house again. But I'm just being dramatic because I don't really like this type of weather, but then I get into it and then I'm okay. So welcome, Valerie. It's nice to see you too. Gary's coming in also. Oh, there's a couple more people coming. Everybody wants the everybody wants the results of this case study, which I'm super excited about. So yeah, while everybody's getting in and getting comfortable, just want to heads up that we will not be meeting next week. Hey, Cheryl, it's good to see you here. Gary, I think you're here finally now too. Awesome. So we will not be meeting here next week. So we're going to take the last week of the year and just, I hope you all do as well, regroup, reconnect, rejuvenate, all the re's, especially Mercury's retrograde. It's a perfect time for that. Nice red light, Cheryl. I like it. And then we'll be back again at the beginning of the year, same time, same channel, but at the start of 2024. And we have some exciting things happening in 2024 inside our community, which I am just going to drop that teaser and not spend a whole lot of time on, but we got some really fun things coming up in 2024. So I will welcome you all back then and really looking forward to having our Tuesday trainings. So sometimes when we take a week off, we forget. No, we're coming back 2 weeks from today. So just wanted to put that out there at the start today. So far, for the last few weeks, we have been working with a case study, not always on the case study, though, I acknowledge. We've been working with a case study that we brought up several weeks ago. And from that case study, we have explored lots of aspects of working with people and constitution types and how do you put a case study together? And I want to acknowledge each of you who've been here for all of those weeks and all the contribution that you made to the conversation. Super rich conversation. And it's given me lots of opportunity to reflect on what we've come up with here on Tuesday trainings. So tiny bit of context here. Tuesday trainings is, for everybody. I like being a part of a global movement of body workers. So both movement and manual practitioners. I am both. If those of you who are here listening on the replay haven't met me yet, I'm both a manual and movement practitioner. And like you, I was also looking for solutions to, intense problems. I started right away working in an orthopedic physician's office and had very little time to solve big problems. So that's where my focus always has been. I think that we end up in the right places that are right for us, even if we don't think that we created them. We always did. And so over time in my, several decades in this industry, I've been lucky enough to interface with other colleagues, all of you. And the question most frequently asked is never about anatomy and how the body's designed, but what do I do about XYZ, fill in the blanks. And it's usually client related. And I love that because I too am up to solving big problems in a little bit of time. And I have been like that from the very beginning. And unfortunately, the answer is not always that straightforward. Like, well, what do I do about X? You do Y. It doesn't really work like that. And so I want to, again, acknowledge each of you who've been here for that conversation for the last several weeks, because if it was that simple, we all wouldn't be in continuing education over and over again. Our licenses wouldn't require it. The places that offer us our credentials wouldn't require that we go back for more training because we'd all just have the answers. And it's just a little more complex than that in a really fun way though, right? In a really fun way. So I don't know about all of you, you'll have to tell me, but I have had a lot of fun in the last few weeks uncovering all that gets to be uncovered for case studies. Anna, yes, Cheryl? Valerie, fun? Would you put it in the fun category?
Fun in a torturous kind of way.
Right. And the
I'm beginning
torture,
to think I'm kind of strange.
because you like it. Yeah, but
Yes.
see, here's the thing though, it's really not torture. And I say this to clients too, and I recommend you adopt this line as well, which I learned from a practitioner I was training with. He was doing it was John Barnes's son, and I was lucky enough to train with him in person while he was still with us. And he said that he doesn't allow his clients to say, "Oh my gosh, you're killing me. Oh my gosh, you're torturing me." He doesn't allow for that. And that's where I learned the word productive. He would take his hands off immediately and say, "Oh, if I'm hurting you, I'm not going to continue." And they always wanted them to continue because they wanted the results. So it was sort of like a learned behavior, or a lack of receiving, and just, I think there's self-worth in there to, to not like allow someone to really create change in your body without having to sort of deflect it and make a joke of it. So he would not work on anyone if he was hurting them, and he would tell them that. So he retrained his patients to say, it's productive. There's a feeling here that's productive, something shifting, it's intense and it's productive. And if they couldn't describe it as productive, he wouldn't continue. And so I love the language, right? I love the language choice, but I also love the meaning behind that language choice, right? Like we also, as practitioners, when we're training, we get to recognize that we're here for the good. We're not actually torturing ourselves, and we're not torturing our clients. There's nothing cute about that, right? And it's not a modern thing, where you offend people easily. It's just that it's not even accurate. When you're creating change, you're creating change. And sometimes that can feel like heavy lifting, but it's the opposite of hurting or torturing someone. Same with us. When we're creating change in the way our brains work through troubleshooting or thinking, we're not torturing ourselves. We're actually creating ourselves into experts. So let's be honest about what we're up to here. It might not feel easy if you don't already have that synapse wired to come up with that answer, but it doesn't mean that you're tortured, right? So strategic thinking is not common because there is that mindset of, this is too hard, this hurts, or this is torturous, so I'm out. So for all of you who've been here for week after week after week, allowing your brains to reformat it and how you think through troubleshooting to solution, I applaud you, because it's not common. So welcome and thank you. I'm really glad that you're here playing with me. I have more fun maybe because I've been through more of those strategic brain teasers, if you will. So I'm more used to the feeling, and I attached that it's productive, it's fun, this is for my betterment. So I've had more practice at, well, what does this actually mean when I don't know the answer to something? I also really like to know the answers, not because I want to be right, or, it's not arrogance by any means. I just like to win. Whatever I'm up to, I want to win. And if I'm up to solving someone's pain problem, I want to do that. I absolutely get joy from that, which means I've got to do the heavy lifting and learn how to think so that I can solve those problems. So for me, there's a means to an end. And I would, if you're not yet attached to your means to an end, I would take some time there, because you're here for a reason. What's the reason? And then focus on that reason. We call that vision in our community. What's your vision? What are you up to in the world? Why would you bother? And if you're really clear on why you would bother, then it supports your clients, especially when they come in with complex issues, because you're not focused on their doubt or their fear or their pain even, or their complaining. You're focused on the solution. And if you stay clear on the focus of the solution, they will join you there. The strongest energy in the room is what dictates the energy in the room. If your energy is on vision and solution, you will bring someone to the vision with you and the solution. So your vision must be stronger than their fear or their complaining. And so that's why you're here. So just a good reminder, like, why do I keep coming back for this thing on Tuesday? Like, it's not the easiest thinking I've had all day, because you're up to something big. Because you're up to something big, and that's amazing. That's amazing for you. Okay, so there's our entry for today. We recapped last week on the previous week's findings, because we have been finding lots of archaeological digging as we've been going through. We started with a case study and it revealed all this stuff. Because again, what do I do about isn't really the right question, because there's so many aspects that you need to come in already prepared with to be able to answer that question. And so last week we came up with our list of 9, which was super fun, that we had revealed in the previous weeks. And I kind of like coming up with that list, by the way. I was like, oh, look at us coming up with this list. This is kind of a good list, actually. And that list was from, again, the previous week's revealings. And what we decided we were going to do today was, or last week, was to send you off with that clarity on the list of 9 and your own anatomy knowledge and prowess, your own clinical experience. And then you are going to come back to me with what would you do with this. So that's where we left off last week. If you're here listening on the replay, or just trying to remember what was that case study, it's been kind of a while. We had a male who had come in positive that he had a hamstring pull. Positive. Wrote it on his calendar appointment piece, spoke of it again when he came in. What are you here for? I pulled my hamstring. I want to make sure that we get rid of my pulled hamstring. Okay, got it. Great. That same pulled hamstring brought him in finally after 10 days of a pulled hamstring, pulled in air quotes, pulled hamstring, because the discomfort was starting to go into his back. And then reviewing what he had done physically that he thought was tied to this hamstring pull and low back pain, he was working out in the gym, doing weighted squats. So a 20-pound backpack on his back to add more resistance so that he could build more strength. And that's important for him because he's hypermobile. And so hypermobile constitutions have less inherent strength than others. That's okay because they have other things that others don't have too, but they do have less strength in those constitutions. And so he knows that as a long-term client of mine, and he was definitely looking to bulk up. While he was working out in the weighted squats, he felt a little twinge, not alarming, but a little twinge in his low back, and asked his workout buddy, do you see anything? Because I just felt a twinge in my low back. And his non-body worker workout buddy said, yeah, your low back doesn't look great. Your posture looks a little off. And that's it. That's what we know. So with that case study and with our list of 9 elements that are needed to determine what is needed for a particular case study, what did you all come up with? I would love to hear. Did you do your homework part? And if so, tell me, what did you create last week between then and now? Total hot seating. It's okay. It won't hurt. I won't say anything that makes you feel bad. It's just helping. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I don't know if I actually came up with what to do, but I went through each of the 9 and just tried to come back to that case study, come back to the man we're talking about, and see how I could plug in what we know into each of those 9.
Love it. Love it.
So I don't know. I thought if we could do that, if that makes sense for everybody, because I think that would kind of bring the 2 together in my mind, how that case study relates to what it is we talked about the 9 that we talked about last week.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great idea. So it feels like the case study and all the exploring we did on the guy and his symptoms is just too far removed from our list of 9. So pulling it back together.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know that it's so far removed. It actually feels very, very involved. It's not so far removed, but, just going through number 1, constitution and mobility of the client. Well, we know that he's hypermobile. Okay, check, got that. Number 2, phasic action, joint action lever system, what do we know about what, this case study tells us about, the joint action that was being used. I don't know. Does that make sense to
Sure.
have that conversation? And then, because we're going to get to, some of those tools that I think is probably likely that we're going to want to use some of those tools for the things that we're going to do, right? You know, like the PNF, and I know you talked about the measurement, which I don't know much about, you know, so there's some things that I know that you know more than that I am just learning about, you know, that so I don't know, I'm kind of like not really sure of the answer to that.
Okay.
To what
Perfect.
to do, but I want to relate it, you know, to what we've already talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. We can absolutely go through that list. That sounds like a fun journey. I will emphasize something that you brought up though, Cheryl, the tools. There's a couple things I hear from practitioners. I just want to highlight this. There's a couple things I hear from practitioners over and over and over and over again. One is they want to solve the problem, and how do I solve the problem, which I already mentioned. Another is, well, I'm not this kind of practitioner, so therefore I must not be able to, you know, or qualified to resolve it. Also, buoy, not true. And the third is about tools, right? So, oh, well, maybe I'm just going to throw out names, and I love them all, and I have studied them all, believe me. Maybe it's, well, I don't know myofascial release, or, oh, it's that I don't know passive assisted stretching. Oh, it's that I don't know trigger point therapy. Like there's all these zones of tools and trainings that we think, well, I don't have the right tool, so that's why I don't have the ability to solve the problem. And I understand where that comes from, because inherent in learning a tool, you've got to know the anatomy. Otherwise, you're just learning the tool like a puppet. You know, someone says, put your hand here, you put your hand here. But if you don't know why, then you don't really have a foundational understanding of the function that you're addressing or that you're creating change in. So inherent in learning the tools, you do learn more anatomy and functional anatomy for sure. The tool itself doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It's what you know about the function that solves the problem. Because if there was one tool that solved it for everybody, we would all have that tool. We wouldn't be here right now still looking for how to solve problems, right? And I recognize that because I thought the same thing. Oh, well, massage therapy must not have been enough. I must need to go learn XYZ. Or I must need to have this specialized tool as a body worker. Or I must then learn how to do movement. Like that's got to be it. So it got to be movement. So there was always like a way to decide that I didn't know enough because there was some other tool that I hadn't yet been exposed to. And I don't think that's true. But in saying that, again, learning how to use the tool and what the implication of using that tool is where the meat is. Because that tells you more about the body's design and what the body needs from you. There's not one magic tool or we would all have it. Just like there's not one type of eating that works or we'd all be eating that way, right? Like it's different. And sometimes it's different for different people too. Maybe the tool of PNF is exactly what you need for one client and it's not what you need for somebody else, given, you know, the answers to these 9 as you're sharing, Cheryl. So I want you guys to absolutely keep studying your whole lifetimes. If you're a body worker, movement or manual or both, I want you to keep studying for sure. And I want you to study because you're learning more about this magnificent design, not because you think there's a magic bullet somewhere that you just haven't yet found. That is chasing something that doesn't exist. Because if it existed, we would have found it by now. I've been here for 30 years. I would have found the tool. If there was a magic bullet, I would have found it. I was hunting for it. So you just get to learn more. And even inside our community, there's still some of that way of thinking. Like, oh, I thought this was going to be the answer to everything. And right, but the answer is within you. It's how you think through the problem that gives you the answer. Not this pen or this paperclip. So that's my mic drop on tools. You get to know the tools and the implication of why you're using them is really where the meat is. Okay, so we'll absolutely go through the list, Cheryl. I love that idea. And I don't want you to think that number 7, the tools, is the one piece that you don't have that kept you out of having a solution. That's not exactly it. That's what I really want to emphasize. Yeah. Okay, So Anna and Valerie, is there anything you want to add before we walk through the 9? Is there something you came up with in the last week that you want to explore? Valerie's like, nope.
No, I didn't have time to delve on that this week.
All right, no problem.
Too much we did our holidays this past weekend.
Fun. Okay, great. Anna?
Yeah, I came up with, if he was in front of me as a yoga teacher, what would I do? But the thing that was always lingering was, wait a minute, before I work on core strengthening with him, I know that there needs to be a release here. And that's, so that's where, didn't matter what I came up with, was, okay, there's something I need to release, but if I go to thinking, okay, he came in with this pain in his hamstrings, certain that it's hamstrings, then should I be releasing, or should I be, in fact, engaging the opposite side of the lever, meaning his glutes, his quads, sorry. And then I kept going, no, I've got to do PNF somewhere. And then it was, okay, do I do PNF on his hamstring? So I stopped myself from, let's do a lunge and let's work on core and let's blah, blah, blah. And it was like, no, something needs to be released here. We need to do PNF.
Great. Love it, Anna. Really well done. And correct. Something gets to be released because something's in the way. And we started getting clarity. I think we actually did get clarity as a group when we were talking about the lever system and the types of tension and the tensile stress, right? We came up with that together. So a reminder, we get to know anatomy and functional anatomy, and the key is to return people back to both the way they're designed and the way they're designed to move. And there will be no pain there. And then we switch lanes, like in our method, in our year-long track, we talk about a lot, most of the year, we talk about when all that goes wrong. So without knowing anatomy, you can't really solve what goes wrong because you don't know where you're returning them to. And once you know the anatomy, now it's a whole new ball game when all that goes wrong. There's another map in nature, if you will, to how the body responds when things go wrong, which is different than how it's designed to work optimally. Does that make sense to you guys? For sure? Okay, let me say, I'm not believing. You're sort of looking at me with questions, but nodding like, sure. Does she believe it? Because I won't say anything if she believes it. Okay, so for example, if there's any lever in the body, so all joint action happens at a lever, a joint action and a optimally working lever would say that the command is from the brain to contract, that muscle contracts, the joint moves, and the opposite side of the lever lengthens in response to the contraction. And that's all happening simultaneously with the instruction coming from the brain to the contraction first. Okay, got it. And that lever is designed in the body's alignment. So if my pelvis, and I'm just realizing Murph's not in the room with me. So we're gonna have to, I know, I mean, I could run upstairs, but that would be like a long delay. So we're not gonna do that. So if my hips inflection, as an example, you guys all know what hips inflection looks like. If not, please come back and take some of our coursework so that you can have this part of the conversation for yourself. Hips inflection in an optimally aligned form would not include abduction or lateral rotation. Those are different joint actions. And with every joint action comes a lever, which means a group of muscles. So if I'm doing straight up hip flexion, that means that I'm only doing hip flexion and I'm not involving another joint action. And in order for me to do that hip flexion fully on its own, my bones need to be aligned relative to each other optimally so that those muscles can contract fully and do that joint action. But if my bones are not aligned optimally, then that hip flexion already is compromised. So not aligned would be the way most people sit, right? With their lumbar spine moving posterior. You didn't see me do that, but you, in your mind's eye, you know what my spine looks like right now because I just reversed my lumbar curve. When I reversed my lumbar curve, my pelvis also rotated. It didn't rotate. It posteriorly oriented itself, right? Mm-hmm. So when my pelvis is posteriorly oriented, now that means that the hip joint itself is not neutral. So now my hip flexion is compromised, and the same muscles that do hip flexion are responsible for that alignment of my spine that also changed when I sent my lumbar spine back and tucked my tail under. Does this make sense to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Seeing it?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I'm insisting on hip flexion with that kind of alignment, there's going to be other muscles that have to do the job because that is not aligned to do the job. But I'm still insisting on hip flexion, just like the guy in the gym. Still insisting on hip flexion, even weight-bearing hip flexion. Body can't get away from doing it. But the muscles aren't aligned to do the job. Bones aren't aligned to do the job, which means the muscles can't fully do the job. And our bodies are generous. They will do anything you ask them to do, even at the risk of doing it incorrectly or causing pain. So they will recruit other muscles that aren't supposed to do that job, or they will create responses in the muscles that are responsible for doing the job. And now you're in the other lane, that other nature of when things go wrong. What happens then? That's when different types of tension come into the conversation, which we talked about a few weeks ago. That's when extra joint movement comes in, not necessarily joint action, but other joint movement will come in because the body is asking the surrounding areas to sort of support. Like if you help me, I can look like I'm getting the job done. And the guys are like, I don't even do this job, but I could try to help. I mean, I could try. And now those muscles are kind of sort of doing their job too. That's a different nature of mechanics. Okay, so that's what I mean, like the two different lanes. How does it work? You got to know how it works and who does the job. And then when it goes wrong, there's other characteristics that are common and a whole new template that don't exist in the optimal form. They exist in the way that the body will do it. So like, it's not like, I want to be really thoughtful here. It's not like suddenly we've been invaded by an enemy and oh my gosh, no, it's still our body. Our body is doing what we asked it to do. It's our ally. But we are not being mindful about what we're asking it to do, and we're causing a lot of duress. So it's the mindfulness in the movement that comes up. Okay. It's interesting because when my pup was alive, I used to watch him a lot, and he moved all kinds of ways without thinking, like, where's my pelvis? Where's my spine? Where's my alignment? Like, he didn't have to like think about all that stuff. And he would never do something that wasn't optimally correct. And sometimes I would tinker with him. I never hurt him, just for the record. I loved him more than any other creature. But I would tinker with him sometimes and like pull on his legs or like hold his spine in a particular position and then move his neck or move his leg just to see what would happen, not to hurt him, but just to like make it more difficult for him to do the movement. And he wouldn't. He would never do it. He instinctively, he'd pull away. So we've got this amazing, like, go ahead, Cheryl.
Who is this? A person?
My pup, my dog.
Oh, okay. Your pup. That's what I was thinking, but then I was like, wait, are you talking about a child?
No. But it's interesting though. I did have an experience with my youngest nephew too when he was growing and developing, but that's a different story. But dogs have of all the animals on the planet, dogs' anatomy is very close to human anatomy, very close. There's obviously some distinctive differences, but their anatomy is very much the same. Even if you look at the names of their muscles, they're even named, some of them even have the same names as ours. So it was easy to play with him and see what function would look like if I, made it a little difficult for him to use this part of his body, but then asked him to use this part of his body. What would he do? He wouldn't. But if I do that to a human, they'll do it every freaking time. They'll be hunched all over and then doing hamstring stretches. I'm like, what is happening here? Like, how are you getting yourself in that pickle? Because we have consciousness. We have a different way of critical thinking, which means we get to use it or not use it. But we're not, we don't have the same instincts as other animals do that don't have the same type of thinking. So all that to say, we get to be mindful about teaching folks what their alignment should look like, which means we get to know what that is. Okay, so you're absolutely right, Anna. Something got to be released on this guy because something went wrong. There was a haywire in the natural order of things, and we get to identify what that is and move it out of the way and then return him back to his design. So you're exactly right on that. So let's walk through the 9 and see if we can get to the treatment plan. We'll use Cheryl's idea. I think it's a great idea, and we'll see if that gets us to the treatment plan. Okay, so number 1, constitution matters, and it alters alignment and function. We talked about that last week. What do we know about his constitution, and why does it matter?
He's hypermobile.
Yeah.
And it matters because he has more flexibility in his joints and probably not as much strength.
Right. And so having more ability to move in his joints, Cheryl, why would that create a problem? Why is that part of what caused the problem for him?
Because he wasn't able to hold his alignment as well.
Yep. And if he wasn't able, yes, exactly. And if he wasn't able to hold his alignment, what would that mean?
That he can be out of optimal alignment.
Mm-hmm. And then how would the body respond to that?
It wouldn't be an optimal alignment, and other muscles would do the job that instead of the muscles that are supposed to do the job. I mean,
right.
It will recruit other muscles to do some of the work.
Yep. Exactly. And that's really important. And especially with hypermobile people. In fact, Val and I just recently had a chat about this as well. So how do muscles who are not being treated well in a hypermobile constitution react? And why is it that some practitioners, whether you're manual or movement, will release the muscles that you think are tight and they immediately return to being tight in a hypermobile constitution? Have you guys ever had that? Where you release muscles, you stretch somebody, get them lots of relief, and then everything tightens back up again? Or you do manual work on them and release their muscles and then everything tightens back up again? Anybody ever experience that? Mm-hmm. Valerie has? No, Cheryl? It's really common, and it's specific to hypermobile, right? So what ends up happening is, let's just use the muscles along the spine as an example, which, by the way, does feed us in this particular case study too, so we're not too far off track. So the muscles that hold the spine up, we'll call them paraspinals because a lot of them have similar roles. We're just going to call them paraspinals for this conversation. We know that the erector spinae hold the spine erect, and we know that the other muscles and the joint actions are shared. So we're just going to call them paraspinals for the ease of our conversation. So the muscles that hold up the spine in alignment do their job to hold the spine up in alignment, except that the ligaments that connect the bones together are lax, which is the definition of hypermobility, which means now that the bones are sort of like floaters. They're kind of like free to roam, free to explore, free to move, free to be in opposite relationship with each other instead of like ... the way we want them to be in an ideal mobile constitution. So the bones are sort of floating and the muscles are holding them up and kind of like, you guys stop moving, stop moving, stop moving. I'm asking you to stop moving. Be upright, be upright. So there's more tension in those muscles to do their job because they have to or want to keep the body the way it's designed. Bones aligned, bones aligned, bones aligned. And the ligaments aren't helping the way they could. So those muscles are tight. For sure. They're overworked and underpaid. For sure. So it would be normal for a client to feel tension and for a practitioner, movement or manual, to try to release that because tension is uncomfortable. So if you go to release those muscles that are in spasm or in contractile tightness or even in turgor or any of the types of tightness that we talked about, it would be tempting to want to release them. You probably should, by the way, except that once you release them, now nobody's holding the bones in place. And so the bones are going to float again because the constitution is a fixed issue and the muscles are going to go back and try to hold it back up again. Like, oh, thanks for the breather. Thanks for the breather. Oh, shit, we got to do our job. hold up the spine, right? So that's why it feels like a little bit of back and forth with a hypermobile constitution. The other possibility that is very common as well is that as soon as you release the tension in any type of tension in muscles in a hypermobile constitution, you have destabilized them. Because nothing's holding it up now. Nothing's holding those bones. Nothing. Like, I'm being dramatic, right? Like, obviously the ligaments are still present, but they're not being held in their optimal alignment. And so now there's an instability in the axial skeleton, which is where our balance is. You have destabilized them, which might not mean that the same muscles then contract and come back like the previous example. It could be now that another set of muscles somewhere else does contract, or another bone somewhere down the chain moves, which then makes the muscles around that bone jump to command, right?
New
So
set
that's,
of problems.
say it again, Doll.
A whole nother set of problems.
It's actually the same problem. It's in the constitution.
Right, but okay.
But I think I hear what you're saying. But what we could think as a practitioner without this knowledge about hypermobile constitution is that now we're symptom chasing, because we actually do think it's another problem. It's the same problem.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, we still want to solve it the same way at this part of the axial skeleton as we solve it on that part of the axial skeleton, and destabilizing is not solving. So we get a little bit of like, well, Gina, you just said we should release them, but if I release them, I could destabilize them or they can contract again. That doesn't sound like I should do that, right? Because that constitution requires a different approach. And that is why we need to know the constitution, because it requires a different approach. And we know this guy's hypermobile. So we now know, we're like, oh, wait, if I release this, then what happens to him? But because he was hypermobile, this is how he got into the problem. But now the way I'm going to solve it, I get to be thoughtful about that. So it does matter. Constitution absolutely matters, because it'll be the difference between you generating more symptoms while they're with you, which used to happen to me, by the way, early in the day. I'd be like, oh, I know exactly what to do. And I'd release it. And then they'd be like, oh, gosh, my hip. I'm like, how does our hip hurt now? What the hell? How did I make it worse? I didn't make it worse, but I didn't solve the problem. Those aren't the same thing. Okay, and not solving the problem is what you're up to. So we might as well get to that and not go into the self beat up that comes with not knowing constitution types. Okay, so constitution matters. That's why it matters with this guy. Perfect. Then we had number 2, phasic action of muscles was our second element. What do we know about phasic action of muscles with this chap? Their case study.
His bones weren't in alignment when he went into hip flexion, when he was lifting. So therefore, he was throwing things off. He could not, the lever system was not working properly.
Okay, and Val, how do we know that he was not in alignment?
Because his buddy told him his lower back was wasn't looking too good.
Yep,
so
exactly.
So the rounded back instead of a lordotic curve, he's thrown into tensile lengthening tension.
Yep, love it. Really important. So glad that you said that, Valerie. It's really important to know, because you know, right? We don't make up stuff. Practitioners get themselves off to the races a little bit when they make up stuff. Well, it must be based on what though? Like, if you have the answer, then you know. Then you don't have to question and second guess your questioning, and knowing gets you to the answer. So yes, he told us I was not in alignment. I was not in alignment in my lumbar and pelvic area, and somebody spotted it and told me. He didn't say those words, but he said that. So now we go into, okay, well, what muscles are in that area? And are those muscles responsible for the joint action he was doing? Yes, they are. Okay, those muscles can't do their job fully. They can't fully contract. They can't fully lengthen. And we did talk about that in an entire Tuesday training a couple weeks back. We're like, oh, I see where the lever went wrong in the phasic muscles. Perfect. Okay, so then number 3, we had the anatomical. Oh, Anna, did you want to add something? No, okay. So then we had number 3, which was our anatomical design and form and function. We get to know that coming in. So what do we know about the body's design in the activity that this chap was up to in the gym? Describe the form and the function. What was he doing?
He was doing a squat. I mean, he was hip flexion. The lengthening of the glutes and the hamstrings. And I mean, is that what you mean by what the body was doing?
Mm-hmm.
What function, what form, what function?
Yeah, all of it. So that's a large piece of it, Cheryl. I wouldn't say that the hamstrings were fully lengthened because they were not lengthened at the knee, but the upper fibers were. So they're a biaxial muscle. So they're lengthened up because of the work that they do with glute max, but they're shortened down at the knee because of the flexion that they do at the knee.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So,
yeah.
yep. So we've got all that. And there's a couple other things we know about the body's design and its function. What else do we know about a squat and what he was up to?
Well, we know that the psoas was shortened.
Mm-hmm. Because how do we know that?
Because of the action of that muscle when the hip is in flexion.
What's the action?
Flexion.
Oh, hey, Pauline. Nice to hear you. I was like, well, whose voice is that? Hi,
I'm
Pauline.
sorry.
Yeah, it's good. I'm glad that you're here. So, yep. So
What
the
did
psoas
Pauline
does.
say?
She said flexion, and my follow-up question is flexion of what, Pauline?
The Soas.
Yeah, the psoas does flexion of what?
Of the hip, the pelvis.
Yep, flexion of the hip. What else does it do? Or what else do we know about form and function? Mm-hmm.
That
It's a core stabilizer.
It's a core stabilizer. Yep. What else do we know about form and function in this particular chap?
Oh, yeah. Well, again, he had that rounded back.
What is
So
that?
he wasn't fully contracting, nor was he fully and he was extended with his
Extending.
form. So he was in tensile, but he wasn't in full contractile
Of what, Val?
of his psoas.
Okay, so from the psoas perspective, yep, we said it was on the slack. I couldn't fully lengthen or contract. But you brought up also his alignment. We know that the lumbar curve matters. It's not only hip flexion that we're up to when we're doing squats. This is a classic place where personal trainers can really pour into themselves. If you know the optimal alignment based on the body's design, you will be able to instruct optimal function that's safe and actually builds muscle. It can't happen though if the pelvis is in the position that we just described earlier with a posterior tilt and a reverse lumbar curve. You can't create full contraction in those muscles, can't gain strength. And that's not the way the body's designed, which means there could be pain in function there. Doesn't have to be, but there could be. In this particular guy's case, he said it was.
He had a tweak, right?
There. Yeah, because the body doesn't want to work in the position it's not designed to work in. It'll tell you, hey, something's a little bit off here. Twinge, right? And unless you address that twinge, the body's telling you, hey, you're not an optimal form or function, right? And if you don't address it and you keep plowing through, the body's going to be like, shit, we got to figure it out. Figure it out, kids. And everybody runs to the field and does what they're supposed to do. And then everybody pays for it later, right? So the body was telling him, yeah, this is not optimal form or function. And as movement practitioners, we get to spot that in the moment. For those of you who do movement, alignment, yogis, Pilates, personal training, And for those of you who are manual practitioners who are working with clients who work with other movement practitioners, you get to tell them the alignment and how their body's designed so that they take that with them into their workout routine. So we're equally responsible for that. The body is designed that way. Body is designed that way. You don't have to teach movement to be responsible for the way the body's designed to do movement. It's on all of our shoulders, all of us alike. Okay, so anything else about the anatomical design and form or function that we get to know about with this particular chap?
The added weight, which adds more stress to the situation.
Which requires the situation to be more optimal. For sure. Because we're designed to hold up our own weight. Sometimes we don't even do that well. Adding more means that this has to be ideal and optimized so that more weight is contributing and not diminishing. For sure. Again, those of you who work in movement facilities where you're adding resistance and weight training, you get to know that. Like that matters to the work that you do for sure. Anything else? Okay, let me ask this question. What is the mechanical purpose of a squat? Why do people bother?
Good question. Please tell me.
There's a good reason for it. Why do we do squats? Go ahead, Anna.
To strengthen the glutes max.
You got to say glute max today, Anna. I'm so happy for you.
Yay!
Yay! Yep, for phasic purposes, it strengthens glute max. What else does it do?
What else does glute max do, or a squat?
What else does a squat do? Yep. What else does a squat do?
Obviously, it contracts the psoas, and it certainly strengthens the legs as well as you're bending down and coming back up. So you're engaging all kinds of muscles in your feet, working right up the leg chain. So when done properly, you're engaging core because your spine needs to be in what we talked about right there. The axial skeleton needs to be in proper anatomical alignment. And how are you going to do that? The core has to be engaged.
Yeah. And we talked about that a lot in our first module, the SHOTS method practitioners. We had lots of slides of lots of squats that looked optimal and lots of squats that did not look optimal. And the commonality between them is you must use the core. And the absence of an optimized core will distort what a squat looks like. And that's the dead giveaway that that person is not prepared yet to do squats, because they will do it without the optimized form, which means other muscles will jump in and then we're off to the races. So core strength, core integrity is the biggest takeaway for that I recognize when it comes to squats. Does it increase lower body phasic muscles? Of course. And I'm, again, just from my lens, I'm looking at axial skeleton and optimized function and what's needed to keep people out of pain and to get them back out of pain if they find their way there. So in an ideal world, the way the body's designed, yeah, squats are a great booty lifter. Hallelujah, we all get to do that. I'm looking at it from an orthopedic lens when it all goes wrong, and it's because of the absence of the core, the true core, and the function around using the core, which is often missing, more often than not. Okay, awesome. Which takes us to number 4, intrinsic action of muscles. So what do we know about intrinsic actions of muscles in this particular case study? What do we know about intrinsic muscles in this case study?
They're not engaged optimally. Optimally, because we've got the paraspinals and the core not engaged optimally.
Exactly. And how do we know, again, Anna, just repeat for us, how do we know they're not engaged? The intrinsic muscles?
Because of his the curvature that was existing in his lower spine, in his lumbar.
Right. Because intrinsic muscles do alignment, they do posture and balance, which includes alignment, right? They are opposing gravity to keep us perpendicular to the earth. If any part of our design does not look optimized perpendicular to the earth, we're not engaging intrinsically.
I'm beginning to believe that intrinsic muscles are more important than phasic muscles, or at least they have to be in place first before we can add any phasic, which is a real mental change for me. I thought it was all about phasic, and through our coursework, I'm really beginning to understand it's all intrinsic.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. Same. And that's how we ended up with our method, right? That's our third touchstone, right? Because it was also like, what am I missing? What am I missing?
Yeah.
And phasic, I love phasic muscles. Are you kidding? I like to look in the mirror and be like, okay, girl, your Pilates work this week. Like, I love that too. And the intrinsic muscles or lack of strength in intrinsic muscles, hypermobile, inability to get people to be out of pain and stay out of pain, that's not a phasic issue. That's an intrinsic issue. So I agree with you. There's a lot of, there's just a lot of focus that we get to put there as practitioners, for sure. Okay, then we have number 5, tension types. What do we know about tension types as it relates to this chap in our case study?
Tensile stress is when the muscle is lengthened to its maximal length and can't lengthen anymore, which we know the lumbar spine muscles are in that position.
Yep, so it's lengthened to their maximum capacity and held there. So lengthened to maximum capacity is not a problem because we're designed that way. Fully contract, fully lengthen, but it's lengthened and held. And in this particular case study, they were held under resistance in a lengthened position because of the 10-pound backpack. So they were definitely held. Yep, awesome. What other types of tension do we get to acknowledge in this case study?
The Soas.
Go ahead, Anna.
Go ahead.
No, Anna said you, Val. Go ahead, Val. What do we got?
Because the slack in the psoas, it couldn't fully contract.
Because
we're dealing with contraction as well as the tensile. Is this what you're referring to when you talk about tension types?
Yep.
Okay.
These are tension types. Yep. So Cheryl gave us the tensile stress in the paraspinals. What other type of tension? You said contractile?
Contractile.
Where?
And then tertiary. The contractile, but it was on the slack. So it was an improper contractile in psoas.
Yeah, it was. So the psoas was already in slack, meaning the origin and insertion were towards each other. When he went
to contract, and it could not do it properly because of the slack. So it could not do the job properly.
And he had to, because that was the main joint action, which is hip flexion, which is his job.
Right.
So he's going to just muscle through, pun intended, and try to get the job done.
Right.
And do all the other things as well. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Which is more the rock in the road? The tensile stressed paraspinals or the contractile stressed psoas? In this particular case study, which is more the boulder in the road, in the way?
Psoas.
How come?
Because of its prominent job, it's a stabilizer. It couldn't stabilize properly either, as well as contract for the flexion contraction.
Well, he's important, but that doesn't mean that he's the biggest boulder. But yes, you did name his role for sure. But how do we know? So now we're into, okay, I got to get the boulder out of the road, turn this guy to optimal function. What do I do? Right? That question, what do I do? What do I do? Is the tensile stress paraspinals more likely the boulder in the road, or is the contractile stress psoas more likely the boulder in the road on this particular case study?
The tensile stress paraspinals, I think, because the body is not in optimal alignment, and we've already said that if it's not in optimal alignment, then it can't do the joint function properly. So to me, that's the bigger boulder.
Okay. Anybody else?
I thought it was, if I remember the conversation, it was the psoas because it's doing the contraction, and contraction is the action, and we want to be able to do the action again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if there's already an action in place, which is contraction is the action, and if that muscle's in contractile stress, it's basically locked in its action.
So we need to release.
Yeah, which would prevent the paraspinals from contracting, for sure. But asking them to contract against a locked contractile stress psoas is backwards.
Right, they can't because they're stuck.
Mm-hmm. They won't be able to contract because the psoas needs to lengthen for them to contract.
Right. So the boulder is the contractile stress on the psoas.
Mm-hmm. First step boulder in this case study. Yes, that's the first one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Great. Then how are we at the end of the hour already? We're only halfway through our list.
Oh my gosh, we gotta hurry.
Okay, so optimal alignment of the axial skeleton, both internal and external. We've sort of talked about this already, it's coming up in our conversation here. What do we know about the optimal alignment of the axial skeleton relative to this particular case study? What do we know about it?
Well, we know that the hips were in a posterior pelvic tilt, or the pelvis was, so that's out of alignment.
Yeah, and technically the pelvis is not axial, it's appendicular.
Oh.
So, yep. So, but what else about that though? So what else about that position, Cheryl, would be axial skeleton specific? What would the pelvis do to the axial, pelvis in that position? What would it do to the skeleton, the axial skeleton?
It would, the paraspinals would be out of alignment.
Well, the paraspinals, or what would be out of alignment?
Or not the paraspinals, because that's muscle.
There you go.
The skeletal, the vertebrae.
Yep. Which one specifically?
The lumbar.
Yep, exactly. So, and we've sort of already said this, but notice that we needed to know that alignment to be able to get to the answers we already talked about, right? We know that when the axial skeleton is out of alignment, specifically the sacrum, nothing else can be in alignment. So internal and external alignment, we mentioned last week. There's an external, like what does it look like in their posture? And then there's the internal, which we do measurements inside of our method. And that's, more addressed in number 8 here on our list. Do you guys want to stay a couple extra minutes and finish this list?
Yes.
Please get us to 9. Okay. Let me just double check to make sure I can make that happen. I can. Okay, good. Okay. So then we talked about the tools. Number 7 being the tools to restore what's needed. So far, we've identified 2 things that are needed. What are the 2 things that are needed? So far, we've identified 2 things that are needed. What are they?
Contraction and lengthening.
Of what, Valerie?
Proper contraction of psoas and proper lengthening of the paraspinal stuck in tensile.
So we need to lengthen muscles that are stuck in tensile?
They need to work optimally. They need to do their job, and they're stuck and can't.
So what do they need to do? That you said they need to be lengthened. Is that what they need?
They need to come out of tensile. That's what they need.
Right. So that lever system needs to be restored. Yeah. What else, Anna?
The psoas needs to be released.
Mm-hmm.
And the paraspinals need to be strengthened.
Great. Yep. So we recognize that in order to get that lever restored, Do we address the paraspinals that aren't able to contract because they're stuck in tensile? Or do we release the psoas from doing its death grip so that the lever then can contract on the opposite side? And we decided it was the psoas first.
Yeah,
So we have to release it.
We need to PNF that baby.
Yep, we know we need to release the psoas for sure. And we also know that we need to restore the axial skeleton to neutral alignment.
Yeah.
And that might need to wait until the psoas releases and that lever is restored. We don't know yet. So we know that we need to do those two things already. And then, as you mentioned, Anna, PNF is a tool that all movement and manual practitioners can use. If you have another way of releasing a muscle that's bound in contractile stress, then use that tool, right? The tool itself is not the answer. Notice it's number 7 on our list. The tool that you're going to use to release that muscle stuck in contractile stress is not as top of the list as what does the muscle need. And the only way we can get to that is by knowing the anatomy. So the tool is not secondary, but it's having the tools doesn't tell you how to solve the problem. It just gives you something to do the job with. So again, I'm just sort of bringing that back because we talked about that earlier in our conversation today. We have a ton of tools inside our method, a whole host of tools inside our method. And halfway through the mastery track, y'all don't have them yet. It's not the relevant part. You'll just start throwing tools at jobs to try to get the job done, but you don't know what the job is. You got to know what the job is to be able to apply the right tool to it. So again, hold on a second. I really want you guys to go at it in that order, right? Yes, I want you to be loaded with tools, ready to go. Every toolbox has lots of tools in it for sure. You got to know what the job is first to be able to pull out the right tool. Okay, great. So PNF would be awesome for getting that psoas to let go of his death grip, and then you can move on from there as you roll out in your case study. Number 8, optimal alignment of the axial skeleton. Now, we don't talk about these measurements in Tuesday training.
I thought that was number 6.
Number 8 for me.
Okay.
What do you have for number 8, Val?
I don't. I'm rewriting all this.
Okay.
I just thought when we were having our discussion, you said optimal alignment of the axial. So, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, I have a question that I'm the same question because I don't have my notes obviously with me, but I wrote down axial skeleton optimal alignment for number 6. So Cheryl, what do you have for number 6?
I have alignment, external and interior of axial skeleton.
How's that different from 8?
Okay, I'll get it to you right now. I love that you guys are Johnny on the spot. So we know that alignment of the axial skeleton is important. Actually, alignment of all joints is important, right? And the axial skeleton is certainly top of the heap. And we know that because we also have our formula, alignment, strength, function. If the body is not aligned, the bones are not aligned, the muscles can't fully contract. We've talked about that.
Right.
That's from an external viewpoint. When I mentioned optimal alignment of the axial skeleton, I mentioned as number 6, I mentioned there's an external view, like is the pelvis tilted? And then there's the internal view, which you can't tell unless you measure someone. Even with really well-trained eyes, you still need to be able to measure them. And the measurements give you other information about the inside alignment that might not be visible at all on the outside. For example, I could be sitting in optimal alignment with the 4 curves of my spine balanced, everything stacked the way it's supposed to, all my joints in axial alignment. We talk about that at great length in our training program, which I know you guys know, all that. And I could still have a sacrum that's slightly askew, or a scapula that's higher than the other, or something going on with my Oreo cookies. My discs might be just slightly adjacent to each other, but it's not affecting whether or not I can hold myself in optimal posture. That's a different viewpoint. The internal alignment is not the same as the external alignment. They're both needed.
For your measurements, are you using goniometry?
No, I don't know what that is, but that sounds fabulous. I'm using measurements that I created while I was working with clients. They were just sort of downloaded to me in put your hands here, and what does that mean?
Okay.
So, yeah, so we have 2 tiers of measurements inside our method that I developed as I was working clinically. And the training is really not in the measurements themselves, but what does that mean? When you're picking up a measurement, what does that mean? What is the body doing that it's not supposed to be doing? And that's really where the juice is, right? So taking measurements is a tool, but the tool itself does nothing for you unless you know what to do about it. So that's,
Right.
again, to our conversation about the tools. What's the phrase that you used, Cheryl? Geo what?
Goniometry?
Goniometry. Never heard of that.
You know, it's like a tool that you use that it's for measuring the lever system and range of motion.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I think I have one of those. Maybe I do know what that is.
Yeah,
It was way
yeah.
back in the day. Yeah. And it's like a ruler that opens. And
Correct.
then you can, got it. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so fun. That's
It's like a ruler with a protractor, I think.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I never heard it
Exactly.
called that before. I can't even remember what they used to call it.
Yeah.
Gosh,
Goniometry. Yeah.
goniometry.
A goniometer is what the tool is called.
Yeah, I either totally don't remember that or we called it something different, which is also possible. It was back in the dark ages, according to my most recent anatomy teacher that I went to school in the dark ages. It's fine. It's fine. So yes, no. I know what that tool is, checking range of motion in lever systems. The measurements that we do inside the method are on specific bony landmarks to let us know the orientation of the axial skeleton to itself. So you wouldn't necessarily see that in joint action.
Okay.
But it does give you a whole host of information. And then number 9 on our list was compensatory patterns. And who added that to our list? Somebody added that last week. You, Cheryl, you added that to our list. Okay, great. So talk to us about that. Why do compensation patterns matter, and how do they relate to this particular chap's case study?
Because it's patterns that we form just, I think, with everyday life. It's patterns that we repeatedly do that will affect how our body changes. And that what I understand is the compensatory patterns, they do stack as well. So you sometimes have to unstack them.
Yeah, exactly. Or know which one came first.
Okay.
Know which one came first. Anybody else on compensatory patterns?
Can you rephrase that so I can write it down? Pattern or repeat it. Patterns we form repeatedly.
I don't know what I said. Yeah, I mean,
Oh, no.
I mean, it's almost like habits, it seems to me. But I mean, I also think that it could be like, if somebody wears heels every day to work, or they slouch a certain way, or they sit on one leg, it's like the patterns of movement that we kind of settle into.
Yeah,
it can be. Yeah.
You're making me think of another training we'll do. There's a difference. There's a similarity and a distinction between patterns or habits, as you're calling them, Cheryl, compensation patterns, which are results of function, and recruitment.
Yes. Okay, that makes sense.
So there's a distinction and a similarity between the 3, and I think it's helpful to know because, again, those are in the when it all goes wrong lane. Like there's a certain nature and characteristic of what the body does when it's not being given what it needs optimally, and these phrases, compensation patterns and repatterning and recruitment, all show up in there. Like, what does the body do? What does the body do in hip flexion when the lumbar spine is not in optimal and the psoas is on the slack? What does it do? How does it get the job done if it's not even supposed to get the job done that way? What does it do to get the job done? Exactly. That's the question on the table for
that
this.
Would be an excellent one to go over. That would be most beneficial.
Well, truthfully, we've already covered a whole lot of that.
Yeah, but to coalesce it would be beautiful.
Yeah, I'm recognizing that from our last few weeks together, that saying it once is great, saying it many times is better, right? Just repeating
Sure.
it, idea from a different viewpoint in a different part of the conversation, say the same thing again, put it together with a different part. And that, my friends, is exactly why we get to keep studying, right? As soon as you learn the tool, or as soon as you learn an element of the body, you still get to keep applying it, right? So, and I'm really glad that this is coming up today in this particular group on our Tuesday training, because inside our community, it also gets to be emphasized, right? Like, and I would say that to be fair to you and to whoever your educator is, just remember that the one thing that you're looking for, if you're looking for a magic bullet, you'll always find fault with the teacher or the program. It doesn't work that way. I basically, seriously, this list of 9 that we just went over, we've been going over for weeks. We still don't know yet what we would do for this particular client, and you have all the information, which is not a dig. It's a refresher of being like, wow, it takes me a minute to put all this stuff together. It takes me a minute to review this over and over again. It takes me a minute to go over it and hear it again, the same idea in a different way. It takes me a minute. Like, if you give yourselves that latitude, you'll feel easier about the process, and you won't be full of frustration about what did or didn't get delivered to you. It's not like that. I did deliver it. So it's been delivered. The answer has been delivered, and we get to sort it out. You get to sort it out. Of course, with me, I'm here for that every week. I live for this. Are you kidding me? Pouring into you and creating these brains of yours to go off and do a magic work in the world lights me up beyond end. And we get to go over it until we're done. You get to go over it till you're done. So just give yourselves that latitude when you're in training anywhere with me or somewhere else, to allow yourselves time to process what you know. Even once you know it, there's still a processing time that goes with that. And that's just fair to you. So it'll take the pressure off a little bit. Okay.
Okay.
All right, my loves. So we've gone through our list of 9. Cheryl, I love that you brought that up. I might not have reviewed it in that way. I'm so glad that there was value for all of you. Did you guys get value from going through that list? That list of 9? Oh, hey, Gary popping in for a cameo at the end. Nice to see you. You're muted. Tell us what you're saying, but you're muted, Gary.
Yeah, I've got to talk to support so that when you guys send out the contact for the webinar, it's coming through a problematic way. So who do I contact in your group to? It's coming out as San Clemente Retreat, and it should be coming to my own email. I hate to take everybody's time for this, but
Okay, Gary, you want to put your email in the chat? Are you comfortable with that? And I can swipe it from the chat and update that.
yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think we have 2 different emails for you registered for this. So you should have been getting it at the other one as well. But we'll update it. I'm happy to do that. Glad you're here. Okay, awesome, my loves. So good. Thank you, Gary. I'll grab that.
Thank you.
Grab it before we go. So I have it. It's been a delight. It's been a delight walking through all this with you. It's been a delight having you guys come back week after week and pour into the refresher and the review and the renewal that you get to have. I trust that you're all doing amazing work in the world, and I am here for it. I am here for it. So I just want to send you off for the next week with a breath of fresh air and hopefully some feelings of accomplishment, because you guys got through some really awesome material together in the last few weeks. And I'm super delighted to have been part of that at any level. And we will come back at the beginning of the year with all new training. Does that sound like fun?
Gina, thank you for your commitment to the learning process, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, thank you guys for your commitment. You're also here every week. I'm not talking into the ether by myself. So it takes us all, and I'm here for it. I love it. And I'm really grateful to call you guys colleagues. If you know of any other colleague who gets to also know what we know, please send them to the replay, send them to the YouTube channel, have them watch the video. It's usually populates right away as soon as we're done here. and have them leave some comments so we know what else we get to train on. Okay?
Gina,
No,
what's
okay.
the YouTube channel again for you?
It's the shots method.
Okay,
Mhm. Gary, are you in the student lounge
I don't
on
think so.
Facebook? Okay.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Mhm. Yep. The channel is the shots method, and it's got our logo, the little green guy. And
Okay,
if you
thank you.
subscribe to the channel, it'll give you a notification when there's replays or any other videos available.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And
Gina, before we leave this, because then we're leaving this. So my one burning question is, okay, we know we need to release the psoas, but he came in with this pain in his hamstring. And I know you've said don't hang the moon for your clients, but will releasing the psoas immediately release the pain in his hamstring?
so I,
That's a start.
By sending him off still with what he came in with?
well, he came in with a symptom. Maybe we should have put this on an element. It's actually not really an element. It's the law of the body. He came in with a symptom. So the hamstring pull is a symptom. It wasn't real. The hamstring itself was not pulled. It was a symptom. And 90%, 80 to 90% of the symptoms in the body are referred from somewhere else. We know this.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's referred from somewhere else, do I need to address it specifically, or do I need to address where else it's coming from?
You need to
No,
go back,
of course,
go
of
back
course,
up,
of course.
upstream.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is he going to walk out with his hamstring still hurting?
Well, not if he's under my watch, because I won't let that happen. But to answer to your question, do I need to do something to the hamstring to get the hamstring to stop hurting?
No, I know you don't. I know you don't.
Great.
But so I'm clear on that.
Great.
But is he going to, I have to appease, no. Yeah, I know.
That's okay, Anna. It's only being recorded for the whole world to see. That's all right.
Ah,
I'm gonna shut up. But I guess my question is he going to walk out? So you're experienced and you're well known, and they come to you and you know your stuff. So I'm none of those things yet. But is he going to walk out and his hamstring is still going to be sore and he's going to say, "What the hell? I'm never coming back to her again." That's really my question. Is he going to walk out with the same pain that he walked in?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's not the right question. The right question is, what caused the hamstring symptom to show up? How did everything that we know about this guy's mechanics, his constitution, his alignment, his weighted backpack, how did all of that equal symptoms in the hamstrings? Because we know it didn't come from the hamstrings, so it came from all the other things that we know. And so I would invite you to walk through that. And again, this is in the land of when it all goes wrong. What did go wrong? And what was the implication of that? What was the implication of a posteriorly tilted pelvis that's weight bearing? What's the implication of a psoas over and over and over again, bearing all the load of hip flexion, not being able to fully contract or lengthen? What's the implication of the glute max and the hamstrings that also are part of that lever that's interrupted? What's the implication of all of that? When you can answer those questions, then you'll know what needs to be addressed, because that's what caused the hamstring problem. And when you address it, there won't be a hamstring problem anymore.
And I'm going to proudly say that I can work my way through all of that. And
yeah.
So my question simply is he going to walk out of your office with the hamstring still hurting him?
Did he?
I already answered you. Go ahead, Cheryl. What?
Did he walk out, I think is what you're asking. Will he or did he? And you already said that he did not because you wouldn't allow it.
No, he definitely didn't. And I checked in with him a couple days later, and he hasn't even been back. But he did text me to ask me about some of the things that we did, because he wants to buy some things for stocking stuffers.
Yeah, so it worked back then. It all fell into place, that quickly. That's fantastic. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Question.
Well, it fell into place quickly, and I will say he's been a regular client for a long, long time. So he knows a lot of the same things that you mastery practitioners know. Like he knows about his apex sitting. He knows about he does his homework from previous sessions have become his daily maintenance. So he's already keeping good care of himself based on work with me previously. So I don't want to misrepresent and say, oh, in one session you could fix anybody with hamstring pull that did, a sloppy squat. Maybe, but it depends on what else they've got going on, what their, what their body brought with. They brought with them in their body. Yee, that was tongue tire. Gary, did you have something? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
No. Oh, thank you. Okay. My absolute pleasure. My absolute pleasure. I'm wishing all of you so much light and love in your world and in your family and in your heart. And I can't wait to see you guys in the new year.
Yes.
Can't wait.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye for now.
holidays.
Bye.
Bye.